Okay, good morning, everybody. So this is going to be our first roundtable discussion of the day, and we're going to be looking at the cultural arts and the value to the Kingston community. From our previous conversations just before we came on live, we are just trying to stick to cups of tea, but there might be some whiskey coming in there a little bit later. So what I want to do is get everybody to introduce themselves, and then we're going to go through a couple of get some different perspectives. The whole point of this particular roundtable is that I went to Kingston University to do my art degree, and I think people really don't value enough and really possibly don't even understand enough what is meant by the cultural effect within a community. And in Kingston, we obviously have the Rose. We have fantastic university, the college, the creative youth, and we have a lot of strength with that. And my personal feeling is that we have to be very, very careful with this, and that we don't allow this just to become an economic consequence of what's going on. This is one of our true strengths in this borough. And what I'd like to do with this conversation is to get people's perspectives of where we are at the moment and where there is the value of bringing people together in the community. So, first of all, can I introduce you to Maria? Would you introduce yourself and what you do?
Hello, everybody. It's lovely to be here. My name is Maria Christodoulou, a very long name. And I joined Kingston University as Associate Dean for Research, Business and Innovation on the 1st of May. So I haven't left my bedroom since then, and I keep meeting people online. My role will involve developing strategic partnerships with local organizations in Kingston, but also working in national and international level, and thinking of how we can work together for the benefit of our local community and of the wider public.
Thank you, Maria. Louise, welcome.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Louise Coles. I'm the Chief Executive of Creative Youth of the International Youth Arts Festival. We are a local charity, but we do have a national and international kind of reach. And really what we're here is to enable young people to kind of realise the potential using the medium of the arts and culture. So, yeah.
Thank you. Robert.
Hello, I'm Robert O'Dowd, Chief Executive of the Rose, which speaks for itself. Prior to that, I actually worked for the government on community-based and user-centered projects, so I have an inbuilt passion into that. In addition to being the Chief Executive of the Rose, I'm also on the Executive Board of the Chamber, and I'm the Deputy Chairman of Kingston First, so I'm always very interested in two connections with culture and the arts. One is the business impact in a town, a region, in a country, but actually in these day and age, at this time, the societal and community impacts that the culture and the arts can bring. So I'm very excited about this breakout panel to look at both the economic impacts of culture, but also the societal impacts.
Thank you, Robert. Cheryl.
Hiya, so I'm Cheryl Hibbert. I work for Kingston College, the Deputy Head of School for the Creative Industries section. So that encompasses performing arts, production arts, media, music, fashion. So we offer courses predominantly at A-level level, so 16 to 19-year-old students, but we've also got quite a large higher education capacity in our school. So we go all the way from level 2 to level 6. I also oversee the use of our inbuilt theatre, the ACT, and how to engage the community in the use of our ACT theatre.
Brilliant, thank you. And last but not least, Robin.
Thank you. I missed all of that, Cheryl. I'm sorry, for some reason I couldn't hear you. I'm Robin Hutchinson. I'm lucky enough to have been involved and still involved with the Rose Theatre Creative Youth International Youth Arts Festival, and also the Creative Kingston Group, and particularly the Community Brain at the moment. And I suppose my element is that culture is a very dangerous and loaded word, and I think we need to unpack it and allow more people to understand what it actually means in the way we live our lives, and that it can never be seen as a nice to have. I think it's core and essential to any way a community lives together, and it's going to probably be one of the most important strands that we build around as we emerge from COVID. And I think for that reason, this is an incredibly valuable discussion at the right time, because the future cannot be grey.
No, some very good points there. We kind of kick-starting this off. I mean, before Sunday, I was looking through clippings and just kind of appreciating from the theatre to the general arts as to the noise or even lack of noise as to how it was going to be sustaining out of this period. Obviously, there has been the announcements made on Sunday, but I just want to kind of step back a little bit in terms of just to get your sense of perspective of where you sense people view the value of culture and the arts in Kingston as it stands at the moment. So, Louise, can I start with you on that one?
It's interesting. I have mixed views on, I think there is a segment of people who definitely get the value of culture and the arts and are frequent goers and all those sorts of things. Sort of general public, I still think there's a bit of work to do around the arguments. They make the arguments around the arguments that we need to sort of share and get across more as to our value. And obviously this is one of the ways we can do it. And I think the digital platform, we've just had a fantastic webinar series as part of DigiFest, the International Youth Arts Festival's digital platform. And we were discussing these sorts of things actually. And there was a sort of general consensus that the digital sphere is also a way of getting across to more of a wider audience, to be able to start having those conversations. So, I'm hopeful, because I feel that we at Creative Youth have a huge role, and young voices have a huge role in being able to sort of share what the arts and culture can do at all sorts of levels. So I'm not Kingston based, but I live sort of in St Neots, but I've used to work at the Rose, and I feel that there is definitely a bit of a way to go to still get this message across about what we can do, and it's not just theatre and pantomime and sort of the wider ramifications of what we do. So yeah, I'm hopeful, and I think we have definitely a role to play, and I want to be able to address that more.
Thank you, Robert. I mean, you've been with the Rose, and it's kind of a very visible central hub. What's your perspective on this in terms of how people perceive it?
I'd go back to Robin's sort of view. I can't remember who quoted it. It may have been Robin, that towns, cities, regions can have economic profiles, etc., but the heart and soul of any town or region is actually the cultural activity. I think people often assume culture is institutions, and it's not. It's about people. And actually, I think that as institutions and as sectors, we don't help ourselves, because we kind of like our ivory towers, and I'm talking about the general sector. We have a real demographic problem in culture. It was very encouraging to hear the RSC actually admitting, the Royal Shakespeare Company, that with COVID, they suddenly realized that 80% of their audience is white and over 60. So it's good that with the billions of money they've had from government, they're beginning to accept some of the structural issues. I think you started off the comments, Forbes, as well about the value. Well, at a national level, all I can say, because what you saw on Sunday afternoon was the culmination of 3 months of huge behind the scenes work that we've all been doing. And on Friday night, the figure was 0. Midway through Saturday, the figure was still 0. It bounced up to about 300 million. And then what we don't know, something happened from Saturday night through to Sunday that got it to the 1.57 billion, which is fantastic. I think there's been a very fractious relationship between the Treasury and DCMS. And the DCMS actually have had to learn very quickly about what they're looking after.
Damon, what does that stand for?
Sorry, the DCMS is the Department of Culture. Sorry,
just what did that acronym stand for?
Sorry, it's the Department of Culture, Media and Sport. So Oliver Dowden, who is the minister, looks after Huawei's 5G to Premiership football to art galleries in the Lake District, which is quite a portfolio. And he was new to the portfolio in April, so a bit like Maria, learning on the job via Zoom. But I think locally, I mean, we it's not been publicly announced, but we have a new 5-year funding agreement with the borough, and in everything I've been going through in the last year and a half with the new administration, and actually during COVID, the borough value culture hugely, and it's a really integral part of everything they want to do. So I think there is now more of an understanding at national level and regional level of culture. I think, though, we as a cultural bodies and cultural individuals, we've got so many things we have to address, and I'm hoping that COVID, taking advantage of a crisis, is where we can really make traction and changes into diversity, into youth profile, into community, into outreach, because we tend to be very inward looking, and we need to stop being inward looking. Anyway, that'll do for me.
Thank you, Robert. From the college's point of view, I mean, this has been a really dramatic kind of handbrake turn to a degree of how you can look after the students and how that goes in so many different ways. How you find the initial period going forward?
I mean, it's challenging, but I feel like it's interesting because we have a lot of students that come to us that may have studied particularly performing arts at school, and they say they've got this passion for performing arts and they love everything about it. Yet a large majority of our students have never been and seen live theatre. They've never been around live theatre, they've never seen it. So I do think being in Kingston, our value for the arts is actually a brilliant place for students to learn and engage in the community. So not just on a course, they can actually engage with creative youth. They've got the roses on their doorstep. So in terms of a borough, I think they are very well looked after, if you like, in terms of the accessibility to the arts. Obviously with COVID, it's not just about how we're delivering lessons, but it's how you enrich the whole student experience. So it's all right having a kind of a Zoom lesson over the phone, and we've been doing brilliant work in trying to deliver these practical lessons, but actually you can't replace that enriching value of getting students to see live work and engage in all the stuff that they are missing out on. So it is a struggle. Obviously with the advances in media and technology, we can bring a lot of stuff to the students, but I feel like the real struggle is that live theatre element, which is a struggle at the moment. But hopefully it won't be forever.
Yeah. Maria, you've kind of got as Robert said, is that you're relatively new, sort of coming into Kingston. What's your sense? What's been your sense now that you've kind of been there? Okay, from North London for 2 months, but what's your perspective so far?
I don't know Kingston very well, and I will be very happy to get to know it better once I'm able to travel there. But having been at the university for over 2 months now, and obviously I knew the university and I knew Kingston School of Art from before, because Kingston School of Art, as you know, has an international reputation, is extremely well respected nationally and internationally, and has some courses, particularly in areas such as design and fashion and other areas, which rank very highly within the UK. And so I think the university contributes a lot to Kingston, it must do. It's quite exceptional from other higher education institutions that I know or have worked in the past, in that it has public facing venues that are funded by the university or partly by the university, such as the Stanley Baker Gallery, which is a national portfolio organization. It's funded by the Art Council. It presents exhibitions, does participatory events, works with communities, has a program of activity that takes place in the real space of the gallery, but also offsite and also online. We have the Dorrit's House Museum, which is part of the university, and we also, as I understand, have a new building called the Downtown House, which was about to be launched just before COVID. It's amazing and includes a collection that is very extensive on Edward Muybridge's work, for example, which is the beginning of moving image. which is on loan from Kingston Museum. So there's a lot that the university kind of does in terms of activity of venues and engagement, which should benefit the wider public. So hopefully that does come across, and people in Kingston feel privileged to have that access to those resources.
Robin, I mean, you were talking a little bit earlier about just sort of this appreciation. I mean, the one thing people don't necessarily value is that what the creative arts do, it's really just encourages the way that we think and just the way that we tackle things. So I had a really interesting conversation with Cheryl the other day, that actually, whether it's in the theatre or whether it's in design, it's actually what this whole environment does. It's the way that we process and problem solve. And I think it's one of the kind of lesser known beauties of being in this area. You've obviously called it the community brain, but you're very much kind of inspired by the ideas, the processing of ideas. Do you want to just explain a little bit more about that?
Sure, and apologies to Cheryl again. For some reason I can't hear you, so in catch up I'll look forward to celebrating what you're saying. I mean, for us, our belief, it starts with everybody's brilliant if they're given the help and support to be brilliant, and the danger is actually we just don't do enough to liberate people and their ideas. And the culture debate is quite an interesting one, I think, because people have make a decision, is culture for me or not for me, because they'll perceive culture through a lens that they are wearing. Is it theatre? Is it opera? Is it cinema? Well, I don't really like those things, so culture's not for me. And culture is actually our street scene. It's everything that surrounds us. And to me, I think, well, you know, I'll be maybe, because there's a real danger on these roundtables that we all just end up agreeing with each other. So let me go to the other end of it and be slightly more contentious. I think Kingston's not got it at all. I think it's pretty rubbish. I think it's a reluctant borough. And, you know, I think actually we've got really great things to celebrate and we're not doing it. And the Stanley Picker is a classic example. You know, whenever we talk of culture, we go, we've got the Rose. And actually the Rose is in real danger, and it's in danger because it's one restaurant in a street. And when you look at the way culture, and you know, if you draw the parallel with restaurants work well when you've got a group of them together. What happened by the Riverside with John Miles's development of putting 6 restaurants where people stopped going, should we go to Frere Jacques tonight? And actually started saying, should we go for a meal? We're going to Kingston. We've got all of this opportunity. So actually culture needs to be more than a single offer. And the gallery is an important element, and we don't celebrate it. But it's really about access to culture in our street scene, in our spaces, culture is the animation of our borough, and it needs to thrive in Tolworth, in Hook, in New Malden, in Chessington. It's got to be where people are, instead of this, I have to go somewhere to enjoy culture. It needs to inhabit the air. And so, you know, we will look, and I see a question in, what does this package from the government mean? The answer is we've no clue at the moment. We don't know how it's going to play or whatever it's going to do. But the very fact that there's the reference to crown jewels, etc., tells us a hint of what is there. What creative industries and culture are brilliant about is animating the grey, putting colour in. And we are going to end up with high streets that are going to be toothless smiles if we're not careful. Actually, the number of shops that are operating will be against a background of empty. And the danger is we'll do what every other place does, and that is, let's put some vinyl stickers over the front of those shops. Now that's better, isn't it? Now we've got a high street again. No, we haven't. What we've got is hiding the disease in our gums. And what we've got to do, and we're talking about, let's not have pop-ups anymore, let's have pop-outs. How can we put the animated creativity and culture into every street scene, into our parks, into our spaces, but not as a lecture to people, as an invitation to them to come and be as imaginative as they can be. Our future will be focused initially on a celebration of the local. And we've got to provide the playgrounds to allow people to show how brilliant. So when you say to me, what do I love about the life I've been lucky enough to get? It's seeing the brilliance of other people once you give them that little push to go, do you know what? I can do this, can't I? Right. And that's really what culture's greatest gift is, to take somebody who feels they don't quite fit in life and give them the spotlight for a moment, and they realise, yeah, I'm okay.
But it really, from what you just said, you could say that culture is actually, it's an attitude. rather than
I believe
it is this
I believe it is.
attitude.
And when you and that's the danger. When culture is seen as something nice to have, something to tap on the head and go, good, culture's turned up. Oh, culture's looking well today, isn't it? Then it's wrong. Culture, we're going to go through reimagining Kingston and the regeneration program, etc. Unless culture is actually there at the table from the word go, it will always be an add-on. Oh, blimey, we better have a bit of culture here, haven't we? It's actually the reason.
Do you think then that going to what Robert said was that this appreciation of culture, do you think it's an appreciation of culture in its kind of boxes as opposed to that sort of outside of the box mentality? Robert,
I think
the
danger is we see it as institutions and not the activity. And actually, it's 100 years ago when I was trying to build the roads right at the start, we got fixated on a building because that's all we could. And then there's the oh, bloody hell, we're going to need stuff in this building, aren't we? Well, now we need stuff in our streets, in our empty shops, in our parks. And actually, something like the Rose is a liberator. Sorry, Robert.
No, I mean, I agree. I mean, I think one of the problems about arts generally is that they are institutionally based. And if you read Oliver Dowden's speech about the crown jewels, I mean, 70% of theatre, 70% of the employee population or the people who work in theatre are freelancers and self-employed. And so far, there's been no support for them. And this huge announcement on Sunday, which sadly, when you add in every cultural institution, will be spread very thinly, they are expecting the institutions to look after the freelancers and the self-employed. Now, no culture, no art form exists without the creative input. So, but you have, I mean, to catch-22, you have to have a building, not necessarily, actually, I don't think you do need a building. But there is this, I think the government, in particular, the culture secretary, has not got his mind around the fact that 70% of the workforce are self-employed. And particularly people coming out of college and university, funnily enough, they don't have a year's or 3 years bank accounts or trading accounts to draw down money. So there's been a decimation of young up and coming creatives who will leave the sector, which I think is a travesty. I also agree with Robin. I mean, I hate buildings in some ways. And the Rose, we do have a big auditorium, but all the work we're doing now and all the work we're planning to do is getting out and about. You know, we're working already with the Cambridge Road Estate. We're working on a number of other community-based projects. We were very lucky to get funding from Richard Stilgoe's foundation. So to me, what the Rose should be is a sort of conduit to get the community to fully engage at every level, in every street within the borough. It's not about the Rose.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. I don't think it's one or the other. I mean, the way we pit, institutions against community, things out in the community should be absolutely what you've just said, Robert. The institutions need to change and adapt better to accommodate. We're one big arts ecology, and I don't think it's helpful at times the way us, the arts industry, also categorize things. So I just kind of want to say, I think places like the Rose, bigger theatres, need to do much more of that integrated work with the community. So I think we're grateful that we Creative Youth have 10-day access to the Rose to be able to use it in the way we want to use it and bring the community also in the building but out, so make those sort of links. So yeah, I just wanted to say that, because it's a symbiotic relationship. It has to be, how we work as a sector.
I mean, the catch-22 for us and other, by being an institution, I mean, for us just to sort of exist costs £1.5 million to £2 million a year. So we have to turn over that much money. So there is always this pressure, which is not helped by the current flavour of government, between standing on your own 2 feet, the economic pressure, and actually being what Robin, myself, and Louise would actually want to do, which is much more inclusive and freeform, because you've always got the filthy spectre of money lurking over your shoulder when you have a big building like the Rose. So in some ways, it's better to be fleeter of foot and in the community rather than looking after a huge building.
Do you see, I can see exactly what you're saying with that, but can you see any area where that can kind of devolve a little bit more? Could it be led like that?
I mean, if you take the National Theatre as an example, I was slightly shocked to see that they have 1,200 employees, which is quite a lot of people. Now, it is a national institution. It is absolutely a crown jewel. And they are given £19 million a year by the Arts Council to get out of their building. So I think there are ways, yeah, absolutely. And to me, you know, we've got some great public spaces. We've also got some very interesting and challenging housing estates across the borough. And to me, there was a wonderful thing where Irish comics were traveling around the housing estates in Dublin on a flatbed truck, just standing up and doing a routine. So I think, you know, by being an institution and a landmark is good, because people can associate with us, but we need to get out and about. I mean, at the moment we're planning some outdoor theatre and music for August, so the Rose will help draw people along, but then we'll be doing it not in the Rose. And I remember when I was in classical music, I did a concert with Nigel Kennedy at Milton Keynes Bowl, and it was quite cynical, you know, to sell the tickets. We did the Four Seasons, but the second act was him doing his Jimi Hendrix album, and that audience were not expecting it, but about 2 minutes in, they absolutely loved it, and it broadened their mind. But they wouldn't have come to a Jimi Hendrix interpretation by Nigel Kennedy. They came for the Four Seasons, but then they broadened their mind. So the Rose as an institution is a conduit to broaden people's minds and to include them in what we're talking about.
Maria, the university has a very large prominence in Kingston, and obviously you've got the new townhouse, there's Deutsche House. Is there a way that some of this kind of devolution could work so the university provides platforms as well?
The university should provide platforms for community engagement, absolutely. And I'm sure a lot is happening already, some of which I know and some of which I don't. But universities have a civic responsibility and have a civic role to play in their locality, but also on a national and international level. And we absolutely must work with local organizations like the Community Brain, like the Rose Theatre, and I know we do, and not only cultural partners, but obviously speaking for KSA, we do work with a lot of cultural partners, but also we must, following on the points that Robin made, we must work just with institutions. We also need to find ways of opening up directly to community members, to young people, to people from underrepresented groups who perhaps have not accessed higher education before. And I know that sometimes we say that, and the question is, so how do we achieve that? How do we do that? And I appreciate that we need specific concrete actions for those developments. Just saying those things is enough. So I do hope that we can deliver on those aims, and I know that those exist the same, and the senior management and everybody, colleagues, are very committed to reaching out to people in Kingston and elsewhere who haven't previously accessed higher education. Diversity is an issue in the creative sector. We all know that. It's, you know, we've been talking about that for many years now. The Art Council England launched the creative case for diversity a few years back. However, the problem still remains. And we know that as long as we have an issue around diversity, we will have an issue with resilience as well, and with creativity, because diversity boosts resilience and increases creativity and innovation. So we need to be more diverse, not only because it's morally right, but also because it's better for us and it's better for everybody. So we know there's still some way to go to achieving that, but I hope we're all committed to engaging with that issue. And of course, as we said previously, that has come to the fore with the COVID-19 crisis. We're realizing kind of more urgently the issue in the arts and creative industries.
Yeah, you mentioned diversity there, and I mean it's obviously been, still is, and it will continue. There's a lot of work which still needs to be done with this, but the cultural arts as a broad sector has always been, it's probably one of the fewer areas which has allows more diversity from the youth to coming building up. Do you think people acknowledge and realize that kind of what you are all doing is providing one of the best platforms in Kingston for diversity? Cheryl?
Yeah, I mean, that's it. I was going to say, just jumping on kind of what Robin said about, you know, if the arts is more than a building. I think, particularly working with young students, kind of 16 to 19-year-olds, I feel like some of our maybe concepts of what art is a little bit old-fashioned, and actually moving towards this festival of activity opens up the diversity, it opens up the accessibility, and it's actually making use of like the spaces in Kingston that we can actually bring arts, make it more accessible, make it a bigger thing, if you like. I was also going to say, from an educational point of view, as part of the government initiative, work experience was introduced recently as part of student study programmes. So actually making the most of work experience opportunities. There's got to be loads of stuff out there that our students just don't know about, that they can get involved in. And similarly, that's going to influence and make them value, actually there's more to arts, there's more jobs out there that they realise are associated with the arts community. And so when they do leave, they don't leave to become an actor, a dancer, a singer, or whatever it is. They actually appreciate that art are the roles within the industry that they can, and they've been enlightened to, if you like, so that they get to shape and mould what the industry is going to look like from having that experience from a young age. Just a thought, throw it out there.
No, it's really there's some very good points there. Louise, I mean, how do you see this kind of line and direction regarding diversity?
There's a long way to go. I'm going to say diversity in its full form, but you know, we had a Black Lives Matter webinar the other day with 4 women talking around, you know, what can be done, and you know, or they talked a lot about how things are still very bespoke, tokenistic. You know, the sort of been a lot more schemes recently that are targeted towards you know, Black diversity in the arts and so forth, but they still felt that, you know, a fundamental shift needs to happen, and with disability issues as well, a big shift needs to happen to be able to give you know, those sorts of diverse groups more opportunity. And I actually asked the question, what can I do as a CEO to help? What tangible things can I do? And they literally said, you have to start handing things over, you know, to, for example, a young Black person to run. And I said, you know, I get it. I really get it. So this is about me now. And I'm seriously thinking about me as an individual now, and going into my senior year of bringing on board, when we go out and recruit some new young creatives, to literally find, you know, someone from a diverse background and go, here you go, here, I want you to be an assistant programmer for the festival, you know, and give them the platform to develop a diverse program. Because, you know, that's the other thing, it's still very white, middle class led, you know, in terms of what producers, and you know, and I'm one of those, you know, having come up the ranks, you know, what we're producing, what we're programming is not being reflective. So what better way to reflect that diverse community, obviously, to hand over the reins, if you like. So that was a huge discussion. And you know, the art, you know, has, I mean, the ethos is there, that, I mean, people within the sector do want to have an inclusive sector, but there's still a long way to go. And I think the institution thing, you know, again, we have to break some walls down and make that happen. Creative Youth has a huge role again. I mean, I'm blowing our trumpet here. I think it's organisations like us with the young voices and bringing young people at that level. And I'm just touching quickly on Cheryl's point around work experience. And, you know, there's no denying that arts and culture, and in Kingston and everywhere, is a fantastic tool and platform for people to learn skills, to boost their confidence. You know, young people coming up the ranks. It doesn't have to be about them going into the arts. It's just a fantastic, the way the sector works, the collaborative, you know, way we work. It's just fantastic to be able to hone your skills as a young, coming into an adult. And I think I'm personally somebody that's that it has helped when I was in my childhood. And that we cannot underestimate that. It's not just, but also some of the transferable skills. People being a stage manager behind the theatre might end up down the road, I don't know, being working in TV on a sort of camera, or even backstage there, or in other sectors. So I think that's a huge thing that we do as an arts and culture.
That was brilliant. It picks up something which I was speaking to Cheryl yesterday or the day before. This notion that somebody who may start at the college at Creative Youth might be saying, "Can you do this task of doing the lighting, doing the camera?" That can set them on a much longer path further down the road. And it might be on, it happens to be Breakfast Telly, I think we use as a reference, but it does allow that journey. I have to admit, when I did my foundation at Knights Park. I wanted to stay there. I was brought up in Kingston, went to school in Kingston, but I ended up having to go to London College of Printing. And it was the best thing ever, because I met more people that I would have never met as types, all kinds of different people. And I think that's the best thing out of it, is the creative element that does allow you to get more confidence, because you're meeting a broad range of people, different backgrounds than you would normally get. And I think sometimes I could have been sort of institutionalized as being going to school in Kingston and going to university in Kingston. Thank God, by fate, I went somewhere else. And I think that exposure does huge benefits for doing it. But Robin, Robert, what were you going to say?
I think the diversification of the arts, both by diversity, by age, by social demographic, is the big challenge. And the arts councils existed since just after the war. I would hate to think how much money you could add up that they've thrown at it. And it is still, coming from a white middle class, late middle age, one might even say. And just to give a few examples, we've changed back to an artistic director model. We advertised, we had 44 applications. I think within those 44 applications, the BAME candidates were 3. There was a good balance, male, female, probably 50-50. And, on a meritocracy, we've ended up appointing a white 40-year-old Cambridge graduate. Now, I felt really bad about that, but we needed the right person for the right job. I think there's also a huge top-down arrogance about culture. And I think Alison, Louise, you referred to it, and Robin referred to it. Who says what we are doing is good for everybody? I'm not sure that's the right thing. And I remember 2 years ago, I saw 2 shows in the same week. One was at Canada Water Library, which had the youth poet laureate, who actually was a teacher. He had a bad background on an estate in London, and he was doing a show with a grime artist. And other than the 3 or 4 of us who were there because it was press night, the entire audience was diverse, and it was amazing. And the energy in that room was exactly what theatre's about. Not sitting in our Victorian sort of little prim matter saying, "Oh, no one can make a noise, let's all clap what's going on." And at that same week, I was at the Wanamaker at the Globe, which was a Shakespeare show. And the energy was the same, because the actors, if you've been to the Wanamaker, they jump on your laps, and there were people heckling and shouting. So somewhere in this process, the white middle classes have strangled what culture and art is supposed to be about. And I'm really nervous about that. And I think if you look at, I had a fantastic conversation with the widening participation director at the university, and she really put her finger on it. She says, we are going into primary schools at the age of 5 to start saying university is an acceptable route for you to end up in. I think if we take culture, and particularly institutionalized culture, as being good for you in a sort of general Kitchener way, it's good for you. Well, nonsense. Who says it's good for you? Let people go free form. Let them understand what they want. And I'm just looking at some of the comments coming through, and it's back to that catch-22 that all arts institutions and particularly buildings have. You know, when we've done experimental work or we've broadened our work, we hemorrhage money, you know, and we can't afford to hemorrhage money. You know, I mean, but something like Six, when we put Six on, we could have sold Six out. Well, we did sell it out every night for 2 weeks to 850 people. And the diversity of that audience was extraordinary. You know, and so it's actually content and product led as much as it is of putting on, you know, revivals of last century's playwrights or new plays written by people who are white middle class, middle-aged people. So I think I'm talking about the sector, not just about the Rose. I think that I'm hoping that this crisis, as I said earlier on, will give culture, or the cultural institutions or the people who fund and run culture, a huge big kick up the arse, because I tell you, we need it.
That was going to be one of my questions, actually, was that sense of either the kind of, do people appreciate more what live events mean? And also, really, is it going to give an initial kick up the arse and then we just revert to type? Robin, what do you think? Do you think we're reverting to type?
I mean, I think there's always a danger to revert to type, and I think the chase for money quite often accelerates that, unfortunately. Yeah, there's a real danger, and I think Louise picked it up, that we end up in competition with each other rather than within the bigger picture of actually what the creative industries and culture can do. I think there's another bit, and Robert touched on it, is the grey hand of administration that puts itself around all of these things. You know, we are very conscious that actually there is some fantastic diverse arts happening, but the processes don't appreciate it and the processes don't support it. So you will find the most fantastic, stimulating, brilliant pieces of works going on to an audience that wants to see that. But you can't just lift it up and transport it somewhere else, because actually it's been grown within its own cultural element. And I think the danger is that we then want to prescribe its solution. The processes don't allow it to grow naturally, unfortunately. And I think we've got to look at this desire to control. You know, the Arts Council at one level as a funder is also a controlling element. Today's funding stream is you need to focus on this. And all the arts organisations go, bloody hell, quick, shuffle round and focus on this. It's rarely, I think, done because it's genuinely a passion for the arts organisations to do that. And I think we've got, you know, when the Arts Council, weirdly enough, started, it was on, and yes, it was still wrong, but practitioners on the board who said, I've seen this amazing thing happening, we should be supporting it. Now we've got a lot of administration telling us what is good for us. And until we can put the spotlight on what's really happening, you know, a lot of the things coming up on our question line here, comments line, are around, can we not forget Chessington, Tolworth, Hook, etc. Even in our discussions, we accidentally migrate to Kingston Town Centre as being the answer to all of this. Actually, when you see what's happening out in New Malden, when you see what's happening, they're great live music scenes, great activities. They're the ones who need our support. They're the most vulnerable. Everything is vulnerable at the moment, but emerging, the building blocks should be the brilliant activity, the diverse activity that is happening, and how best we support without stifling.
Is there, bluntly, I mean, we all know, we kind of around here, we know what everybody's trying to do. But for that liberation of going into the Tolworth, to Chessington, to appeal to that, to this kind of, to go out, is, I mean, there's obviously the economic issue. There's almost a kind of permission issue. My sense is that it just comes up, we need permission to go off and do this. And then it's just, is there a broader kind of barrier which is stopping these things from maybe taking off?
I think, sorry, Robert, I think there are barriers that we need to be honest about. At the moment, we do a lot of outside events. Outsider events are great, particularly if they're free, because they enable people to come. They won't suit everybody, but it is low bar of entrance to come along and get engaged and get involved. Actually, the process of putting on an outside event is extraordinarily hard. And in fact, if we look at the way the current system is, it takes almost 6 months to get permission to do what you want. Now, given you've got to publicise it, you've got to add 3 months to that. So one of the great things is spontaneous activity. Well, it's hard to be spontaneous with a 9 month gestation period. So actually, as we emerge from COVID, people are going to want to celebrate. Now, if we suddenly go, we want to put on, and we're looking at outside spaces at the moment, you might have seen the rings of chalk that we placed in Victoria Recreation Ground to animate physical distancing in a different way. So we're looking at that already, but we can't get any answers at all back on, will this system be streamlined? Because if we come out of this and we go, there's a party, and everyone goes, when is it? And you go, 9 months time, then actually that will show a borough that isn't fit for purpose.
Robert.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to add to that. I mean, you know, I was having a conversation with the portfolio holder, so an elected councillor, about doing outdoor event, because anyone that follows theatre, we have a 5-stage plan from Oliver Dowden as to when and how we can open, and it's very exciting. And stage 3 is about doing outdoor performances. So the portfolio holder and myself were trying to draw in some officers to have a conversation about it, and the meeting was cancelled because there are no so there is that, as Robin's talking about, the bureaucratic stop to it. So I've actually ended up going to a hotel in the borough of Richmond where we are planning to do outdoor theatre and outdoor concerts, because I can just do it there. They want to do it. We want to do it. We can just get on and do it. And we can do it. And we were planning to do it in the next 3 weeks. So we can, that's not quite as spontaneous as this afternoon. But I think that if we get drowned down in red tape, I mean, everyone's talking about how the hospitality industry comes back and putting out the tables on the street. Well, you've got to break planning permission. And, you know, for us to put tables outside the rows will probably take me 5 years of debate with the council. And then the NIMBYs in Charter Quay saying, oh, no, we can't have people, you know, on the streets near us. You know, they've bought a flat near a theatre and near restaurants, but they're more concerned about everything being turned off at 9 o'clock so they can be tucked up in their bed, you know, with their Tupperwares. Anyway, I'm ranting about the NIMBYism, but we have to be very careful of NIMBYism. And I think the free form that you get actually out in the wider part of the borough, I mean, our target is Kingston, of course, but for us to be a viable theatre, I have to look at the 1.2 million people who live within half an hour. And Kingston only has 160,000 of those 1.2 million. So actually, for what I want to do is broader and wider even than the borough, because that's what, you know, there should be no boundaries in culture.
Very good point. We've got about 10 minutes left. Maria, sorry, you wanted to contribute to that.
I just wanted to say, so I think we agree and we're all on the same page, particularly around the diversity question. And I think in order for us to make a difference, we need to work together. And we need to work together between the people who are here, kind of cultural institutions in Kingston, the college, the kind of youth organizations, but also the council, the university, grassroots organizations, you know, people. We need to work together to make a change happen. And I just want to refer to a project I've been involved in with Lambeth Council. It's called Elevate, and it's about widening access to creative industries professions to underrepresented groups. And that intervention is across the board, starts from schools, works with colleges, universities, cultural organizations. It's a piece in Lambeth. I think we need something similar in Kingston for us to be able to kind of make serious progress in those issues.
That's an interesting point. The fact that you're saying that you think this needs to start at a much younger age to really kind of start getting it ingrained at a younger age, what this can allow you to do. You'd agree with that, wouldn't you, Cheryl?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And even, you know, local businesses, anybody that's got an upcoming event, like we have got students that can be used to open up events. It's just making use of what we've got. And like you say, it's everybody coming together and supporting all local businesses, supporting the theatres, supporting creative youth projects. We've got the facilities, we've got the people, we've got the will. It's just making it actually all come together and helping each other out. Like you say, rather than working against each other on our own kind of missions, it's actually, we can make this bigger. We've got what we need to make it work. It's just driving it forward.
I still have this concern that, I mean, Robin and myself had this conversation, is that there is this kind of permission economic relationship that I still feel that there needs to be an area where we sort of say, can we give this a go? It may work, it may not, but it's that element of space to experiment and to try. And I think, personally, my observations is that it's the only area to actually devolve away from these institutions is to have that broader permission level to say, give it a go. And I think we still have that slight deferring up process. Louise, would you agree or disagree? I think you're mute. You're mute.
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to touch on what Robert and Robin said. Kingston, I've known Kingston for a while, having worked there 20 years, 15 years, whatever it was ago, and then coming back into the borough now. It has to get better. The borough has to get better at being able for the groups that are working within it, cultural groups working within it, not least ourselves. And there are many of them, fabulous things happening, but it has to get better to enabling the council or whatever, Kingston, enabling that stuff to get put on. You know, we every year have a ridiculous thing we have to go through to have a stand for 3 days to put leaflets on to promote the festival, the red tape that we have to go through. I mean, you know, other boroughs, and including where I live now, if I went knocking on the council's door now in St Neots and said I want to put on a festival, someone did this just recently, you know, literally they couldn't bend over backwards. You know, there was somebody willing to do it, there was a group willing to do it, they couldn't bend over backwards enough to enable that to happen. And you'll see that in other boroughs. And I do think, you know, Robin touched on this, we've got lots of people in the borough that will make things happen, but that whole red tape thing, you know, making it really difficult has to change, because we won't get anywhere otherwise. We'll just be sitting here. I want to
I appreciate we've only got about 9 minutes left, but just like, what do you see? What do you think is creating that? What is it that prevents that red tape to kind of start getting thinned out?
I think we're frightened. I think we are risk averse, and I think we're in a position where it's easier to say no than yes. And actually, I think the discovery we're going to notice is those boroughs that are prepared to take a risk and prepared to say yes will emerge in a far healthier state from this COVID moment. And that is my biggest fear, is actually, unless Kingston change its attitude, and it isn't just in culture, this risk element, it's all over. And I think a part of it comes from the comfort that we've taken in the past. We're all right, aren't we? That's good enough. And actually what we've witnessed is other boroughs, neighbouring boroughs, going ahead us. And I know that because of the work that I do with the GLA. We are not seen as an innovative borough. We're seen as the same as. Well, same as isn't going to be good enough anymore.
Is it economically related, that attitude?
I'm not absolutely sure I can dissect that properly. I'm just going to say that I think the danger with being comfortable is you don't have to do a lot. You know, I have described Kingston too often as all fur coat and no knickers. We try and pretend that we're doing really, really well, but actually you've only got to lift it up and realise actually we're quite vulnerable, and COVID has revealed that vulnerability. And whatever we do has to be the benefit of the whole borough, not just the town centre. And we need to start looking, and you know, we've got, I think it says 47 people, including us, listening into this conversation. And my suspicion is the vast majority are already convinced of the value of culture and creativity and what it can do to, in the old expression, we're preaching to the choir. Actually, what are we going to do to demonstrate to those people who still see culture as somebody else, not for me, or it's good, but it's not core? Economic recovery will come through the creative thoughts and creative industry and culture. And we've got to be harnessing and liberating, two different phrases, liberating people, but harnessing the work that they do to power Kingston on. And I would just say to those people who are tuning in, if you want to come and play, contact us, because we have facilities and opportunities both in and outside of the town centre. And I'm absolutely convinced that there will be people in our communities who have answers that we would see unimaginable at the moment. But if we can give them the platform and the playground, there is you know, what I aspire to is in 2 or 3 years' time, people are looking at Kingston and going, wow, how did they do that? And let's go and learn, as opposed to, wow, how did they do that? They took all of those wonderful things and managed to screw it up.
And I'll tell you what, about half of the good answers are not going to be Cheryl excluded from our generation. It's going to be from people much younger.
Well, I'd say to you, Forbes, it will come from everywhere. And that is one of the greatest gifts that we have, is the liberation of all. You know, if we're going to look for a real equality, then actually it's got to recognise that everybody will have a great idea. I've always said in large organisations, the greatest idea will come from the cleaner. You've just got to create an organisation that's prepared to listen. And actually, we are veering back into paternalistic management. Yeah. It's all right, everybody. We know the answers, and these are them. Well, hold on a minute. That doesn't actually fit, because listen to all these people.
Robert.
Yeah, I mean, I think another advantage of COVID is that I seem to spend a lot of time sitting on big industry forums, and I would quote two examples. One is our twin town of Oldenburg, and I was speaking to the mayor, and I said, "So why do you take culture so seriously?" And they said, "Well, you know, we had two tricky moments at the beginning of last century, and we decided as a nation to redefine ourselves through culture." And I was on a call a week ago, and I can't remember who she was now, but it was Liverpool. And Liverpool have said, right, the only way Liverpool as a city is going to recover is through culture and empowering people to express themselves free form, because they get that if you've got culture and with Cheryl and Maria, you know, the creative industries, ignited and fired up, the benefits to the economy and business startups are huge. And I think culture is people try and pigeonhole and institutionalize culture, spoke a man from an institution, but actually culture is free form, and the more free form, the better it is. And then the systems and the structures should harness that and support it, not be limiting it.
I think, yeah, some very, I mean, actually one word which Robin used the other day in the conversation was actually the element of trust. Trust these people that they can do this. And I think there is that kind of stymie, that kind of, can we trust people to go off and to deliver this? Yes, of course. This is what everybody here at this table has been doing on a regular basis. It's an element of trust and saying, you can. Cheryl's pointed out, she said the other day, there's so much will and determination to try and do this. But we're virtually wrapping up. Thank you for coming in. I found that extremely interesting. I appreciate you've all got very busy days, and good luck, Louise, going to your dental appointment. I hope it works out well. I think it's a good note that Robert left with, is kind of pushing culture as a way to engineer a better way going forward. I think that ability to listen, to take on board these ideas, because we have them in abundance in Kingston, from the university and the college, through the creative youth, from all of you. We need to listen more and to expose ourselves more to these ideas. Thank you for your time, and look forward to seeing you soon. So thank you very much. Take care of yourselves.
And thank you to the Chamber for doing this, John.
It's our pleasure. It's a good conversation. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.